All right. So today I have got another guest with me, Bob. Uh, how are you today?
I'm doing all right, Vinay. How about you?
Living the dream. Living the dream. Trying to keep up, learning every day. There's plenty to learn. Um, so, what I'd like to talk with you about today, Bob, is I want to really kind of just jump right into it because I think there's a wealth of knowledge that you have in terms of running a company and how to achieve some success. And I'd love to get some people to be able to understand a little bit of your lessons learned and kind of maybe some of the mistakes that you've made and kind of how you came out successful on the other end of it. Um, so I'd encourage anybody who jumps in on LinkedIn to be happy or just tell us where you tell you where you're from, what company you're with, what do you do. I'd love to see who's online because as we go through this conversation with Bob, I'd love to ask him questions. I'd love to hear what questions you have, whether you agree, disagree. I'd love to discuss. So in the comments, feel free to put your name and who you are in. Bob, let's jump in. How are you doing today?
All right, Vinay, ready to get started. It's not every day that I get interviewed, so I'm excited for this prospect.
Well, I appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your day to chat with us. So you and I talked a little bit about an area where I think a lot of people are always looking for some guidance, some perspective. Sales, relationship sales, and I think that's an area that you spend a lot of time in the past building relationship sales based organizations. And then there's this other side, data, self-service kind of sales where you never maybe even talk to somebody. That's kind of the other extreme, right? Relationship versus data. How do you, in all your years of experience in selling, doing business development, how do you see those things? Are they enemies? Do they exist together? What are your thoughts?
That's actually a question that I've been pondering over the past, I'm going to say, year or two, most strongly. Um, Relationship sales. You always used to think about the three martini lunch, right? The whining and dining. You go and you entertain people, and basically your entire sales role was to entertain people. Like for instance, you look at like the title insurance business. Okay, title insurance. That's actually an interesting example because title insurance companies sell massive amounts of data, but the way that they sell it, honestly, it's a commodity. And they basically hit up real estate attorneys to specify them to be on the hook to do the title insurance for a closing. And all they do is they have tickets to every event in town, and they entertain constantly. That's their sales process. Um, so is that effective? Sure, because that's just how it gets done. Um, but in more other modern parts of business, all these different business models. If you're very consumer focused, yeah, I think you have to be driving data pools to really hone in on who's your best target customer and why. The relationship's not going to be as important. Um, I kind of liken it to the question, if you can answer this, maybe it drives one or the other. Who likes being the client? If
Hmm.
there's somebody that likes being the client, then you've got a relationship sale. If you have someone who doesn't really care about being the client, they just need to get something done, then you're probably going to be you're going to win based on a data driven or probably a price driven solution. To be honest,
So this
did I
is,
answer your question?
so this is teaching me something already. Who likes to be a client? No one has ever mentioned it that way to me before. And I would encourage anybody who's on the line, chime in. Have you heard that term before? It's new to me, and I thought I had heard a couple of things in my life. So tell me more about that. What do you mean? Who likes to be a client? What does that mean to you, and how do you define that?
Hmm. Well, okay. I'm an investment banker, and I'm looking to win the favor of a particular company to do their underwriting when they want to go public or they want to raise money in some other channels. Um, I take the decision maker and his wife on a vacation,
Okay.
first class, all paid for. Um, Is it legal? Gray area. But did they enjoy your company? Did you have a good time? You invited them skiing in Vail at your house. Somebody made the time to come spend with you because, you know, on some level they're like your company, but at the other end of the day, you're also providing something of value to them that they're not getting otherwise. They chose to spend time with you because you were creating an opportunity to have this offline discussion, if you would.
Yep.
Right. And that just, I'm kind of trying to illustrate it by examples that that I've heard over the years. It happens a lot in the fundraising arena where, big real estate funds or even large projects, are financed with institutional money. Well, they're wining and dining these decision makers from the large funds to place the capital with them. Is it legal? Well, mostly, but there's guidelines, right? And you got to stay within them. But until the day comes where that decision maker is not swayed by anything but a bunch of computer data that's saying, here's where you should put your money, then the relationship would be gone. But until that moment, you'll always have this relationship sale. And I think this also starts to get into the conversation about, are you doing sales or are you doing business development? Because business development is a much longer and broader set of activities that enable the business to grow, on a macro basis, if you would. The day-to-day sales, the commoditized sales, totally different skill set. A true business development person who, in a lot of cases, frankly, is probably the principal or a principal of the company, is always out there networking, growing that network, growing those tentacles, if you would, of where that business reaches and who it touches and why. Again, sales is just, we're pounding different channels to find customers. So I think the data may drive you to go after certain relationships, right? And you may use some of that data as a hook to get somebody's interest, but then after that point, you might be on a relationship pathway. Because I think as long as people are still doing business, that's why sales is going to be at least a protected employment category for at least probably until the day I'm no longer walking the earth. So I think that, really what you're starting to drive at with this question is, how long can that last versus, all of a sudden some kind of automated sales channel, like all these automated emails that you get, or these automated outreaches that you get through LinkedIn. That's a little more salesy, right? But it was based on data. You didn't just get that ping because you were on a list. Maybe you did, but you got on the list because you were cold.
Yeah.
So
this is interesting to me. I mean, maybe as I've started to get older, I've stopped thinking about, I tell my young kids, they're all under 15. I tell them, the luxury of being a kid is that you get to see stuff in black and white. And as you get older, it's shades of gray, right? And why that came to mind is I used to think of relationship sales, database sales. It's either or. It's actually not. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. There's a bias. There's a continuum, a scale, right, that it happens on. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing you say a little bit, right? The relationship sale piece is still got to be there, but how much is it in comparison to data driven, right? I mean, if you can figure out who your customer is and what they want to hear, the data might help you figure that out, so that you know how much of a relationship to put it. Am I saying that right? Is that making sense?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, you're. I'll give you an example. Years ago, when I had my moving business, I had a friend of mine actually who worked for a company that was the largest reseller of Microsoft products at the time, and this was in the 90s. And they were actually, this is just when Microsoft CRM was getting launched. It was in beta at the time, and they really wanted to use us as a beta customer to create a CRM. And he said, Bob, what if I could tell you right now how many calls you need to make to get through to the average customer? What if you could get there with 2 calls as opposed to 12? Wouldn't that be helpful? I said, absolutely. Take me to your leader. Sure. Um, but, you know, we unfortunately never got there. But the lesson wasn't lost on me. But it's still a numbers game when you got to dial for dollars, right? Where you're constantly competing against all this other interference of people trying to sell to this customer. Because remember, when we were in that business, it was very project based for the most part, and when there was a project announced, or even before it was announced and everybody kind of knew what was going on, they would get bombarded with calls. It was almost impossible to get through after a certain point. So you had to be one of the first people through, or you needed to be protected by someone else who was involved in the project who they already trusted. So you were constantly trying to figure out really where you were going to enter the doors to get your opportunity. And then once you got your opportunity, then typically it was a price fight from that point on. But it was a really challenging sales platform, if you would. So if it taught me anything, it's like, what could I have looked back on and learned if I would have had that kind of data to tell me, well, if you did X, Y, and Z, it would take 3 shots. But you know what? We weren't that smart at the time, and also honestly, we kind of couldn't be. We didn't have the kind of capital budget to really go through with even the project on the beta test because they wanted to charge us at the time. It was like $200,000.
Ouch. Yeah, it's a good chunk of change.
Yeah, no, well, right. It's not money that a family business who was doing maybe $2.5 million a year in revenue wasn't going to sink the money into.
Yeah.
So, lessons learned.
So I want to come back and tell everyone who you are in a second, a little bit about your bio and your background and stuff, and
Sure.
kind of why. But after we kind of return back to this thread, I want to kind of get us a little further in here because kind of maybe dive one level deeper, because I think there's a lot of field service and trade companies who are out there building a business, and it was always about the relationship, the handshake before. COVID notwithstanding, there are factors that make that really difficult to go and shake enough hands to get customers. So that's one side of the equation. And you got all this data, but there's something in the middle here that I think that's what I'd love to kind of come back in. So let's come back to that in 1 second. I want to tell people a little bit about who you are and kind of why I brought you out. So I'm kind of reading a little bit here and paraphrasing a little bit from your bio. You called yourself from an island of misfit toys general manager. So what I'm hearing is, it says, I have an uncanny ability to envision how toys can play well together. What I get out of that is, and just based on what I know of you, is you can sit in a room of a bunch of different people and kind of get them all to start to see a common vision and get them to all start playing together. Is kind of what I'm hearing there, and that's sort of a talent that you have, right? I love some of these things. A cat herder who doesn't particularly like cats. Record of making something from nothing by establishing productive relationships and connecting communities. Again, being able to build all these little data points together, these points of light, and saying, let's focus the beam over here. Trying to make it a flashlight out of 15 different LEDs. It's kind of what I'm seeing, right?
That's probably a very appropriate analogy, Vinay. I mean, I never really thought of myself in comparing myself to light beams, but it makes perfect sense because you're looking to connect dots that need connecting.
Yeah.
It's a very active thing to be doing all the time. In my world, because it's like, how do I build value? Why would somebody want to know me? Right? Well, if I can get them connected to somebody who's very helpful, then I've facilitated in that activity, and I've bettered hopefully the lives of both individuals or 3 individuals, however many it is that are involved in the project, right? But I don't fit into a neat category, which is kind of where some of those descriptors that I've collected over the years have come into play. It's like, it took me a long time to realize who I was, and I could not fit into a commodity business box. I couldn't do it. I didn't want to be like, for that actor who gets the one big break and they do a mafia role. but then they could be the funniest person ever, but then they never get any other roles because everybody knows them as a mafia guy. You know what I'm saying? It's like that kind of a thing. I never wanted to be pigeonholed. And I've always looked for other opportunities, but it's very unclear to a lot of people on the audience side where I fit in. That's why I describe myself in that way. So they kind of know what they're dealing with up front.
Well, so this is, I want to come back to your bio here in a little bit and just kind of your background, but I tell I've got a relative who's always kind of preaching this idea of be first place, always be first place. And I kind of pushed back on that one time. I said, but who you're actually competing with, because you're in first place for yourself, right? All the time. There's nobody competing for that slot. So you just gotta figure out what kind of race you're in for yourself, because yeah, you can win a foot race, weightlifting, or best business race, but is that business the same exact as yours? It might be some commonalities, but that might be the wrong measuring stick too. I think part of finding who you are is I think where I was going with that.
It is definitely it's definitely a soul searching. I mean, you take the analogy of the gold rush people who went west in search of fortune, but then they ended up with arrows in their back,
Yeah.
right? But the third or fourth or fifth people that went there didn't have arrows in their back. They went there and they probably got something.
Yeah, that's right.
And they probably worked together with someone else in the who's panhandling next to them, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, where are you building these allegiances that'll be stronger than even an individual approach? As a matter of fact, to bring it back into the business development and sales category, one thing I learned when I was doing a lot of the real estate tech work, you should sell collectively, because if I get the audience and I know and I hear from that prospect that they're talking about other things that they're more focused on right now rather than my thing, the smart thing for me to do is be unselfish and put my friend in. Let my friend get established in there. They can pull me in later. And they'll do that every time. Listen, unless they get amnesia, but that's few and far between, right? Sometimes complementary products should be presented in the order in which that audience wants to receive them.
Well, so here's a nugget here that I think I'd like to uncover a little bit, and I haven't gotten through your bio either. I do need to do that. But wow, you're saying, look, if somebody is ready to receive a square and you're selling triangles, stop trying to sell triangles. Go ahead and let them build the square, and tell the guy with the square, hey, I got somebody for you. Because at some point in time, that guy with the squares is going to say, hey, by the way, this person needs a triangle. I think that's what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah, kind of. Actually, I'd say it a little more direct.
Okay.
While you're on the phone with the prospect, you conference in your friend who sells the squares. And you put them together immediately, because now you've created a relationship of value immediate to the needs of the person you're speaking to. And that will resonate with them in ways, with both parties, that you'll be somebody that they cherish, knowing you've created something of value. You didn't intend on creating it that way, but you gave them something they needed right then and there, and you were resourceful, and you were light on your feet, and you were thinking about it. Or you helped save them from thinking, however you want to look at it. In this business, you got to be Fred Astaire to a large degree.
So let's talk about some of these field service and trade fleets.
Sure.
They're oftentimes, I mean, some of them are going door to door, putting door hangers, knocking on doors. Some are, doing it completely online, waiting for it to be in 95 degrees outside before you come to your website and they search on HVAC, whatever the case may be, right? So they're all on that whole kind of spectrum of relationship versus data. I think what I'm hearing here is somebody, if they're trying to build relationships with people very quickly, maybe in like a door-to-door type format or a door hanger kind of thing, canvassing an area, maybe a way to build relationships quickly over time is, instead of just saying, hey, I'm here to sell this, just understand what they need. And if you can get someone in the door, maybe if you've got a strong relationship there, or if you've got a relationship with a company that has what they need, you can get brought back in the door because that trust level is already established.
Exactly. and you know that they're good at what they do. So you already trust that they're going to deliver on the goods, right? Whatever it might be. And if they keep the customer happy, yeah, absolutely. Now, here's another interesting way that it works. The vendor that you introduced could have had a horrible experience with a bad client. You just save yourself having the same trouble. So it works in both directions.
Yeah, and so maybe let's kind of come back to the data side of that, right? I mean, if you start saying, "Hey, look, in the last month, hey, let's say it's a company that's doing door to door, trying to pick up customers in the neighborhood. They just did work, a pest control company that did work. My neighbor across the street, they come across and say, "Hey, look, are you guys looking for any services? We just did some work for our neighbor down the street here, across the street for you." And they say, "I don't need pest control services. What other things do you need for your house to keep this house looking the way it does today?" And they say, "Well, I am looking for an HVAC person." You refer 10, 15 people to that HVAC company that month. At some point in time, it's going to become important for them to kind of say, "Hey, can I send some business in your direction?" Now you're kind of multiplying or amplifying yourself as opposed to just trying to get a sale through the door.
Right. You're creating channel partnerships that are gonna last a long time, and they're going to grow incrementally, and it's going to be found money.
Why don't more people do that? Kind of in theory, it sounds like it's makes a lot of sense, but you also got to take the time to connect them to someone else. I mean, that could be a royal pain in the backside trying to do that, isn't it?
I don't think so. It's a conversation about networking, really, is what it amounts to. And again, that's going to remain part of the human side of sales. Where you go to they have business networking groups, or there's maybe a group of related vendors that meet every Thursday night for drinks at whatever place. There's various ways that this gets accomplished, but it's still a very strong uh, way to sell, because if you get brought in by somebody they already trust, you cut through a lot of interference. And in all honesty, you'll probably wind up getting a better price for the job,
Hmm.
because it's going to be a little less competitive. You're going to have an edge, because even if you're a bit of a premium, there's going to be something resting or supporting that premium argument that you don't have the chance to make that case. Because remember, if you're talking, if you're saying something, it's self-serving. But if your friend says it and two other people back it up, now it's not so self-serving. So your
Well,
chances of
so
winning at a better call, a better price, are going to be increased.
I'm gonna play that back to you, kind of what I just heard there, right? So I'm gonna use a completely different analogy, a different industry. I'm gonna go buy something. I'm gonna buy a four-door sedan for my family, right? I'm gonna go buy it from the guy at the used car lot, or I'm gonna buy it from my cousin, or my a guy down the street who I've known for a couple of years, right? There's a level of trust there already. I'll probably pay maybe even $5 more, I don't know, a couple bucks more, because I have a trust level with that guy in terms of how it's been maintained, how I've seen it used, all that kind of stuff, as opposed to the guy from the used car lot who gives me a certification that everything's wrong. I still don't know, but I trust this guy. And that's basically what you're saying, is that trust level may even lead to a premium in terms of what you can charge to that customer if it comes in through a referral.
Yes, the referral is going to matter. And listen, social media is based on a lot of the same premise. Yelp. Granted, a lot of people question, the veracity of Yelp, but the idea behind it makes a ton of sense. Who reviewed it, and why do they matter to me, and how credible are they? And if they gave a good review and I know who they are, and there's three other people, well, then I'm going to probably give that place a try. Um, it's no different, but it's in this case it's a much more personal service. That's gonna matter a little bit to you, because you're having work done in your house, or you're driving a car. There's greater ramifications to those decisions than did you just have a good or a bad meal.
Yeah.
Short of food poisoning that kills you, your decision is usually not life or death when it comes to having a meal. But if you have a pest problem in your house, or you have HVAC issues, those could be more serious. and more costly. So hopefully you're doing a little more homework and due diligence to make that decision.
So I want to come back to this idea of the customer that chooses you. You're talking about the person who wants to spend some time with you. They probably want to spend time with you because they've got some pain, they've got some challenge. There's a plight that they're in the midst of that is worth their time. I mean, I think I've always believed that if someone spends some time here, that's the greatest compliment someone can give me, because they can't make any more time, right?
And there's a
So
lot of competition for that.
correct, and there's a lot of competition for that. So if someone's going to spend some time with you, I mean, one way to look at it is, hey, gosh, thanks for spending the time with me. So if you've got somebody on the doorstep and you're talking to them and they're spending the time to chat with you, there's something there, right, that they're willing to talk about. It's really more just about finding out what it is, because that can come back to you as a really high quality lead, or you can enable someone else or empower somebody else to get a lead for that day, right? And so it's almost kind of pays you back potentially twice in that case, right? If you look at the numbers.
Yeah, no, that would make total sense, because once you've figured out a background of relatedness, not to take that's a term out of the forum training from that I did years ago. When you start to create that with somebody and formulate a bond where you have some kind of common interest, whatever that might be, and that trust level builds, sure, it makes the wholesale process a lot easier, and they're going to be a lot more apt to introduce their friend who maybe there was their coworker who just left and went to another company in the same role. That's golden. I mean, that's manna from heaven, because now
Yeah.
you could just work on creating that relationship and keeping it also, rather than having to go through a whole new sales and introductory process and getting through all the interference in the marketplace.
I mean,
Every market is noisy, especially some of the commodity services that you've mentioned earlier. There's tons of competition, tons of noise. How do you get through it? How do you get over it? How do you get under it?
but so Bob, my thought is, I can go and knock on 100 doors in the course of I don't know, I'm saying over a day, right? For example, and I hang some tags. But for me to stop and have a conversation with everyone and discover is now a 5-minute conversation, as opposed to a half a second kind of door hanging opportunity. I don't
Hmm.
get as many prospects. But I think what you're saying is that you kind of sow this for a little while and it starts to yield fruit over
Yes,
time.
the
So this,
quality of those prospects, exactly, Vinay. The quality of those prospects is going to be far greater than some kind of. I mean, listen, you're gonna complement this with a marketing campaign that's much more automated. An SEO strategy. Buying some targeted lists, doing some scraping from social media. Maybe there's a degree of activities that are common when people are searching for your service, right? And keyword searches and all those kinds of things. Maybe you read about this is, maybe you're scraping articles that talk about people who have just done certain things, right? Um, there could be a variety of ways that you create your leads, but then once you've got them in the conversation phase, you've got to capture them. But I think that a personal experience with somebody, hey, they took the time to knock on my door, um, and they're not somebody I want to immediately slam the door in, because you're telling me, hey, look, we're doing work down the street in this capacity. I don't think that's that's perfectly okay. Um, I'm not selling vacuum cleaners, right? So to me, it's a positive way to affect a relationship and take it to another level. So all these things are step towards getting there, but you've got to cash it in when you get the opportunity.
yeah. And what I like about, I mean, I'm thinking kind of the analogy here is, I love my analogies, is sort of the snowball, right? This is kind of a snowball, right? It starts out small and you got to keep at it. You got to keep pushing it, keep pushing it. But as you push it further and further down the hill, the snowball just increases in speed and size, right? Until it becomes this gigantic monolithic sort of thing,
Right.
right?
And by the
That's,
way, another way to maybe think about this a bit is that, you're going to probably have a wholesale channel, where there's more scale. Like, for instance, if you're in the pest control business, you probably want to sell to a property management company because now you get scale with one contract, as opposed to selling individual door to doors. But you probably want to do both because your margins on the individual door to door people are going to be much better. But you're going to gain baseline scale from the wholesale. The wholesale is going to be more relationship driven. The other is going to be more hit and miss, right? So you want to build all the channels into your sales strategy. Um, I don't necessarily think that there's only one answer to this, but I think there's a degree of purpose.
So the relationship sale can be a long path, right? I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing here. This is something that you've got to sow and you've got to rake and water and stuff like that. If you go with that seed analogy, for a while, it doesn't happen overnight. So it's a long game play, but if you play it in a long game, it'll start to yield results. Why don't you think more people kind of play that long game type strategy? I mean, it sounds like that is the right way to play it, but it is long game, right? Is that?
Well, I think it depends on the prize too. Some of these big ticket project kind of sales, like I'll give you an example, like a commercial real estate broker. The commissions are massive, but they're not happening every day. And you've only got a shot to represent a tenant or, representing the owner of a building is kind of different. That's a little more of an annuity, but these one-shot tenant rep assignments only come around once in a while, at least on a traditional sense. So you spend years cultivating a relationship, hoping that when that lease is expiring, they'll hire you to represent them to figure out what you're going to do next. And we talked about the investment banking example earlier. Not everybody's going public every day, but where'd you start creating those relationships with various CFOs at different companies, right? Those things take time. They're not going to walk in and do that kind of business when the fees are so high. That's a whole different challenge. Or buying and selling property at the institutional level. They don't just do public auctions. They typically sell to a group of people who they know, they trust, and can close. Right. So there's a whole. I could come up with probably another 20 examples of where that what's the size of the transaction? How big is the sale? What's it worth? Like software, right? It's going to take you a long time to develop enough trust to get in to present why your software makes sense, because it's a big gamble for a customer to change, let alone the cost of what your software is going to cost versus what you're competing against now.
Yeah.
So you got to think of that a much longer term strategy in your sales and business development.
And the thing is, once you have a customer, it's a lot easier to keep that customer than it is to find a brand new one, right? So if you can get introduced in with really warm leads, as in well qualified leads, as in the home inspection company has been around the house and says, hey, look, you're gonna have some problems here with fire ants in your North Carolina home here. You're probably gonna need to get a good pest control company. Do you know any pest control companies? As a matter of fact, I do. Right. That's probably a really good customer at that point in time, and that's a long-term play. Someone else to unseat you from that role is going to be it's going to be a tough thing to do, and that really kind of is up to you to kind of screw that up.
Well, actually, that's an interesting example, Vinay. I'll partially disagree.
Okay.
I would only agree if that person who was assigned to do the appraisal actually follows up and maintains the relationship. But a lot of times that person honestly was referred through the real estate broker, and they show up, they do their thing, they give the report, and you never see them again. I mean, you might run into them in the bar, at the state fair, or in church, but you're not planning on it.
Okay.
Again, unless somebody was able to capture that relationship and keep it and maintain it over a period of time, then I would agree that yes, it makes sense, because now you can continually help them.
Okay, so let's say it's I'll kind of use the same end product, pest control company, but it's a home cleaning service. They come in once a week, right? They're constantly noticing ants, cockroaches, whatever else, and say, hey, do you consider this a problem? And the homeowner says, yeah, I've been trying to figure out how to do it, and I've put all kinds of traps and stuff like that. Doesn't seem like it's doing a great job. Is there somebody I can put you in touch with that can kind of maybe manage the situation for you? Yeah, I'd love for that, right? Now they're going to see them all the time. How does that change the scenario? What does that make that scenario better because of that?
Well, that cleaning person is sticky to them because there's a personal relationship and a trust. They're there all the time. So, as a matter of fact, I would say the best play there is, hey, how about I'll have my friend come over, give us a quote, and you know what? I can even let them in and supervise to make sure everything was done properly.
Hmm.
So you don't even have to be here. I'll handle it for you.
Gotcha. So
You,
all of
you
this
know what
stuff.
I'm saying? You made it so easy for them, and they already trust you that you know you've developed that trust over a period of time. You're always doing the right thing. You're always on time. Your costs are consistent, and your product speaks for itself. You know, they wouldn't have you back the next week if you left the place filthy, right?
Yeah. Right.
So, I think I think it's a matter of how often you're really touching something. You know, if you have regular customers and you're building that base, now you also have the ability to develop business with other vendors by introducing them into your clients. So you can now create more and more of those goodwill channel relationships. So they'll hopefully always remember you. But it started by way of you maintaining the relationship with your person in whatever you're doing, and then you're helping scale that by leveraging it.
So a lot of what we've been talking about makes sense. You're sowing the seed for long term. Because you're playing the long game. You're not getting out of the business tomorrow, so you're going to be in it for, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be. Now, as a owner of a company, as a partner in the company, I can see how they can play that game, right? And they'll say, light bulb goes off as a result of this conversation. They want to start doing it. How do you get employees, the people that are working for you, to start to think like that? What have you done?
That's a really good question. I think that the immediate answer is the compensation model.
Okay.
What are they incentivized to do? If you incentivize them to think like an owner, then they probably will. I.e., did you give them B shares or did you give them, are they getting dividends quarterly? Are they, are you showing them how how directly their actions affect the bottom line of the company? Are you teaching them that?
Well, so
I mean, these are all things that I think would help create that atmosphere to get everybody thinking like the owner does.
So I want to tease that out there. I mean, I think there's two things that I heard in there. Number one is maybe a compensation model that says, hey, if you put money on it, that's one way to get people motivated. Is, hey, there's a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. If you start to do this, it'll take you a little while, but there's something there for you when you get there, right? That's one way to do it. The other thing is making them realize why it matters, right? Why it matters to the health. Look, hey, if you start seeding the ground like this, these neighborhoods that we want to be in, because that's where we want to build greater density of customers. If you start seeding it like this, it may not come back to you tomorrow. It may not come back next month, but maybe 2 months from now, you'll get a call, and it's pretty much a done deal for you, right? And in order to be able to help them see how that actually benefits them, the employee in the long term, might be another way to just kind of draw them into thinking like this. So they're playing the long game too. I mean, if they're playing the long game, I think that's the kind of employee you want, right?
Well, and that's the kind of company they want to work for. I mean, look, my dad was the type of guy that was a worker get fired kind of guy. Matter of fact, you know what? If you disagreed with him, he'd want to step outside with you. He was that kind of guy. That's just how he did things. He's an old school street fighting kind of guy. He tried to be fair, but some people pushed the envelope, and he's like, "All right, we'll settle this another way." But that's a thing of the past, right? I when I took over the company, it was in 2007. I really tried to institute things and start to get people educated And actually, one of the things I learned is that I couldn't get them there. I could not get them to understand how their actions affected the overall company, and I completely failed at it. And then it made me realize that I was a mismatch for the industry, and I needed to get out of the business. It was actually a real eye opener, or one step towards that eye opening process. But yes, the example you brought out earlier is, I think, something that even companies today struggle with, with their human resources. You know, how do you recruit and retain talent? Well, if they don't understand what they're doing and why it matters, then there's a massive disconnect on many levels. And then it's gonna be a race to the bottom and a commodity that isn't gonna matter. And if you want long-term cemented people within the community that you do business in, this to me is logically the only way to accomplish it.
So let's kind of come back to that point of getting the employees.
Actually, and Vinay, let me add one little caveat, because this
Yeah,
may change.
yeah.
And you will be able to continually pay everybody more money, because they will have been creating more and more and more and more value and equity in your business. So therefore, it will translate directly towards better compensation, because you won't have to pay them the market rate. You'll be able to do better because everybody's earning it. Everybody's contributing towards it. You know what I'm saying? So sorry to digress, but I think that was an important caveat.
No problem at all. As a matter of fact, I was doing a podcast earlier that the owner of the company talked about, instead of hiring employees, he was hiring partners to the company. And he said, do they take the same amount of risk as I do? Absolutely not. But that's not the point. If I get them invested in the outcome of the company, then, I mean, the way he said it was, it is $100, is $100 spend or $100 problem going to change the company for me? And the answer is absolutely not. But now, if I have every single employee looking out for $100 problems and constantly coming to me and saying, hey, I've just solved this $100 problem for you, what happens? Kind of like that snowball effect again, right? If everyone's constantly looking out there for solving problems, making things better, you save $2,800 that month, and you did nothing, right? It's just everyone else is kind of looking to solve problems. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing here from you is, if you get those companies invested in the employees invested in the success of the company, then this relationship versus data sale, they kind of get that, and they'll kind of start to seed it by themselves, which does better for everyone overall anyway.
Right. And then they'll even without your nudging them, they'll start to compare notes and compare data about, hey, what did you say to that person that got them to take your call so much sooner? Now all of a sudden maybe the script for the company's changing. So there's all kinds of things that they could do on their own, even without you present. So to me, that's data. That's a data-driven approach, even though it's not the modern, artificial intelligence analytics version, right? And who knows how that'll be blended, and that'll be interesting. Maybe if you have your, I think there's actually one group here in Raleigh that was doing AI, voice-led AI that would actually do your canvassing for you, your preliminary calls. And depending on the reactions of the people, to me, that was kind of fascinating. As a matter of fact, they were on 1 Million Cups at one point. I forget the name of it. It was 3 kids from NC State who were doing it.
Wow.
It was kind of fascinating.
So robot's going to be calling you soon.
I think they already are, Vinay.
Oh, gosh.
You just got to know which ones to hang up on.
I'm behind the times already. If you could distill a lot of what you've learned here, I always like to give people some action items, some things that they can kind of jot down and say, all right, I'm going to go give this a shot. If someone wanted to kind of go down this path of understanding the numbers, but building the relationships over time, what were the first 3 things that you would take them through as steps to get there?
Just clarify what you mean by building the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, so the numbers is this idea that the data, the numbers is all about, all right, I'm not going to lose the sale, but I have referred it out to someone. So I've referred out 25 people this month. what is my return on that investment? Because I have referred it to HVAC company, cleaning company, whatever. I start collecting numbers over here. I can see what value I'm providing to someone else, and is it coming back to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's kind of numbers, but then you're also building a relationship with that person where you can say, hey, look, I'm back in the neighborhood. I did another one of your neighbors a week ago. Just wanted to check into that referral ever work out. But now you have grounds for a conversation, right? There's a relationship there, right? Those two things exist together. If someone wanted to start to think like that, how would you recommend they get started? Does that make sense?
Yes. I think the common denominator in the success of that scenario, because there was multiple steps there, right?
Yep.
It's follow up. If you don't follow up, none of that is ever going to matter. You got to follow up with the person you referred. Hey, did you get in touch with them? What did they say? How did they react? That's good data. That's great feedback. And do you have a CRM that you're tracking all this stuff in? Again, because if you made 6 referrals, but then you got 18 back, 6 times, 3 each, you should know that. But again, if you didn't do the follow up with any of those parties, because you also want to follow up with the customer that you made the referral to.
Yeah.
Hey, how did they like the service? Did they treat you fairly? Hey, I've known Jim a long time, but you know what? Sometimes he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. Did he do that to you? I don't know, but you should follow up, because to me, that's where you start to get more and more tidbits of information that are going to be very, they're nuggets. They're little gold nuggets. They mean more than the average kilobyte of information, right? Because they're very targeted within why these relationships are making sense and why they're working. And knowing that in the back of your mind will help you formulate even more and more and more positive relationships as you build the business.
So
did I answer your question?
Yeah. I think something that kind of occurred to me as you're saying this is, it's almost as though you can use the data to make sure that you build the relationship, and the relationship is what you build your data with, right?
Yeah, right. These are definitely, there's a hand in glove relationship between these things. And again, when we're talking about data in this context, I think it's not the big data sets and it's not the kind of stuff that you typically hear about in business today, but it's still valuable information that is tradable, right?
Yeah, gosh, think about that. Over the course of a year, you've given out, 75 referrals to HVAC companies in a particular zip code. You go to another zip code or your other office, say, hey, look, and the other office, I handed out 75 referrals last month. Is that interesting to you? And that company goes,
it should be.
Yeah,
it certainly should be.
This is what I'm looking for. I'll start sending them your way, but I'd like you to return the favor too. Now you kind of start seeding maybe what already they have is existing customers, where they ask that one question. So do you have any pest problems?
Vinay, it sounds like your platform should start to track the fleets and send out and create leads for these people based on who took a picture of the truck when it drove by, or so I don't know. Or you could become like, you could have like your own little Google camera, that goes around and it kind of looks at the house and the condition it's in and all this other, and ascertains, these people need XYZ probably. I don't know. I think you could start to build these lead generation modules into the physical aspect of your fleet management stuff.
Then all I need is a robot that picks up the phone and says, hey, I saw you took a picture of a pest control company. Can I recommend one to you?
That was already tipped off, because they automatically looked it up, see who the owner of the house is, see if there's a home phone or a cell phone to that person, and off you go.
Yeah,
I love it. I think you're onto something there. See, look at this. We created new value in just 45 minutes.
This is good stuff. If you could go back and wave a magic wand in terms of that experience that you had with those employees and trying to get them to see what their value was for the company, anything that you would have done differently, or things that you would continue to have done?
You mean in terms of managing my teams?
Yeah, I remember we were talking a couple minutes ago about this idea that you just couldn't get them to see.
Vinay, that's a really good question. It's a really hard question. Um,
That's
I
my
just,
that's my
I
job.
just,
Ask you really hard questions.
no, no, no. I'm the kind of guy like I learn more from closing a business than I did from running it.
Huh.
Um, and a lot of the things I tried just, I don't know if they fell on deaf ears or I was speaking up here and everybody else was on a wavelength down here. There was a definitely gap in communication. Um, and I mean, I tried everything to grow my business. I couldn't get it from the 2.2 to 2.5 million a year it did every year in and year out. The best year we ever had it was 3 million, and I could never get it bigger than that. And I would bang my head against the wall trying to try all kinds of things, and I couldn't get anybody else in the company to realize what I was trying to accomplish. And it made me realize, you know what? You're a bad match for this. You need a CEO in the moving business has to think down here along with these people. So I learned that there was a loss in translation, and finally I just gave up and closed the company in 2012, and then started to pursue other things. Um, that was a really hard lesson. So I don't know, to go back and think about, honestly, the one real regret is that we didn't buy the building I was in at the time.
Hmm.
And that was a generational argument with my parents. But in retrospect, that probably I left 25 million on the table.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's a sore subject when I sit and contemplate it. But you can't play these coulda, shoulda, woulda games because you'll drive yourself batty. Um,
Yeah, that's right.
one regret actually that I did have is that I wasn't aggressive enough with the roll up strategy I did. You notice from my bio with the Office Moving Alliance, I would have liked to have been more aggressive at getting that going because you know what? Now they are finally getting around to considering that model
Huh.
all these years later.
Huh.
So, I could have been the chairman, of a global logistics company, last mile logistics company that was doing probably 2 or 3 billion in sales. It would have been a very different world for me, literally. But that's not how it went down. But that's definitely one regret is that I wasn't aggressive enough at saying what I wanted. And I let kind of nature take its course as opposed to me driving it where I wanted it to go. So, from a leadership perspective, I guess I failed a bit there, even though the group is still going strong without me and it's survived all on its own. And I still have some great friendships there. Um, it just, I didn't build wealth from it. I didn't grow anything from it. I grew something, but nothing that I could monetize. And unfortunately, I think you still have to, not to be greedy, but I think you still have to have a profit motive in mind because you don't make any money, you can't reinvest it, you can't do anything with it
Yeah.
because it hasn't been made. You can't benefit anyone else. Um, so, that opportunity in that aspect was certainly missed.
So we're kind of
Did I
coming to
answer
the,
your question?
yeah, I think it did. I mean, I think what I heard from you there was simply that uh, isn't necessarily things that you would have done differently in the time. It's just that looking back on that, it's kind of leaning into what you had wanted to do up front was more important than you gave it import to, right? I mean, you should have said, hey, this is what I want to do. I need to get it done.
Right. And it took me a long time to learn, and I'll say the answer a different way, that I was working with the wrong people. I'm not saying any of them were bad people, but frankly, they were not intelligent. Not zero. There's no creative thought at all. They were robots and wanted to be treated that way, and I was trying to treat them like good people. And a few of them I still to this day feel like they were family. But again, just trying to get them to think creatively about a problem was just they wanted to come in at 8, leave at 5, and not have to worry about anything else. So, I've spent a long time, talk about a life lesson and a shift. I've now been on a journey myself for the past 8 or so years to find my new tribe. Who am I going to work with? Where am I going to find these smart, creative, intelligent people who I feel excited to see every day? Okay, pre or post COVID, or Zooming with every, you know what I'm saying? Who am I engaged with on a regular basis? And I'll tell you, that's been a challenge, an interesting challenge, and I think it will lead me to a place that once I get there, I won't be in the misfit toy land anymore. I'll be more like in the executive washroom of The Simpsons. But um, but the journey will have been worth it. Is really where I was going with that.
So I want to kind of reflect back on a little what I think I've heard today and sort of what I've learned from you is it all starts with building that trust in the relationship. And trust in that relationship is not about making a sale, it's about fitting their need, whether it's going door to door or a long-term big deal investment banking wise, right? Anywhere there, it's about finding, hey, here's what you need. Let me get you connected with that, because you build a level of trust by adding some value.
Instantly and all the time.
Yeah, if you lean in that way all the time, then the value is, it'll start coming back to you. It is a long-term play strategy. It's not a short-term play strategy, but when it does come back to you, it's probably a much more profitable customer for you as well, just because someone else has sold the trust for you.
Right. It could be listen, it could be a customer, it could be an investor, it could be a business partner, it could be a vendor. There's all sorts of relationships that I think that same logic applies to. And you don't have to pigeonhole it just to one, because you're not going to build a company alone, or not be part of a company that's being built. You're not doing it by yourself. You need all these folks to contribute to that cause. So if somebody trusts you, they're going to come along, or
So
vice versa.
I think the second big takeaway for me here is this idea of that we started this out with the title being your relationship sales versus data sales, right? And it's not that the two of them are enemies, right? It's not relationship versus data sales as in they're button heads, as in they actually are in support of each other, right? If you get the data, measure the relationship through follow-ups and understanding how they're acting and how they're behaving. Are they spending time with me? Do they respond to my calls? Do they want to hear from me? Doing that follow-up builds the relationship, which then kind of comes back to potentially very measurable results. So
Yeah,
it's kind of a continuum, not
it's
a
definitely a continuum. You got to keep playing,
yeah.
and keep at it, because you know what? There's going to be some relationships that drop off. There's going to be new ones that get it on. There's going to be some that stay with you the whole time, and there's going to be some that you lose for a while and then you get back.
Yeah.
So now, how do you start to mix and match those resources? People change jobs, they change roles, their point of view changes, their level of experience changes. Or you got young kids entering the market now that are looking to you as a mentor, but yet they're a great set of ears and probably teach you a couple things. Like, yeah, I don't have an Instagram account. Maybe they can help me get one. Not that I want to go get one, but that's not what I'm saying. But I'm using that as a light example. Um,
Yeah.
so if that young person taught me something and brought something to me that I didn't have before, well, when they're looking for a job or looking to change, why wouldn't I refer them to my friend who owns this company over here and really needs somebody with that role, with that set of skills, who
Yeah.
can fill the role? So, you know, it it never ends.
Well, hey, Bob, I want to say thanks. I got some nuggets out of this. I'm hoping some of the other folks who are listening had a chance to get something out of it as
Oh,
well.
hey, look, Vinay, I hope so too. This is my first time doing this, really, and I welcome any feedback or questions or comments from any of the audience, if whoever's out there.